Three.
I have thought of a little bit more to add, a little more that I had forgotten that happened when I was 12 years old. My father taught me two important things when I was 12 years old. One was he taught me to drive a car. And secondly, he taught me to handle a gun. Now, all of my friends seem to be learning these same things about this time also. Now, it was very easy for my daddy to find a place to teach me to drive the car because so few people on our street and in our block had cars when I was 12 years old. It was just a small number of people. And so there was very little traffic on our street and around our block. So it was quite easy for my daddy to find a place to teach me to drive the car. And he chose to do it at the end of our street down near our pasture. And I don't remember much about it except that he was quite patient with me and it seemed to go very smoothly. And it was so good to talk to my friends and know that they were learning to drive the car about the same time. Because their parents also realized that there was so little traffic that this was a good time before there were more cars on the road, that this was a good time to teach us to drive. And I remember that at first I could only drive on our street and around the block, and my daddy drove with me those times. And then when I was doing so well, he let me go by myself down our street and back and around our block. And I thought I had really accomplished something there. And eventually, I was able to drive out away from our block and down other streets to visit friends. And that was so neat for me. And eventually, I remember I was able to drive all the way downtown. And we had one drugstore downtown that gave curb service. Oh, that was a big deal when they started giving curb service. and they had cold drinks, all sorts of cold drinks. And I loved to drive my friends down there and park in front of that drugstore and have a waitress come out and take our order. And most of the time, we ordered limeades. Now, we had heard that Coca-Cola was just getting started and it was becoming very popular. But we had also heard that it could be habit forming and it could be harmful. So we were afraid to drink Coca-Cola, and we just stayed with limeades, and we loved those limeades. And I loved being able to drive my friends down there. And then we would just drive around downtown and drive around the high school and drive around our part of town. And that was just such fun for me. Now, my friend Barbara, who started to high school in Cleburne when she was, I guess she was probably 12 and a half. Her daddy had gotten approval from the county judge for her to drive from their home in Rio Vista, about 10 miles from Cleburne, to drive all the way into high school by herself, because there just was not any traffic on that road. And the county judge gave approval for her to start driving into the high school when she was 12 and a half, I think. So that's the kind of situation in which we learned to drive. And we were so fortunate. Now, we didn't drive. The rest of us who did not have that special approval did not drive outside of town. We just drove around downtown and our side of town. That's where we drove. That we thought it was wonderful that we could drive that far. Now, of course, we just had one car for the family, and nobody had more than one car. And so my mother needed the car a lot of the time, and my daddy needed the car a lot of the time. So there wasn't much of time left for me to use it. But when I had that time, I loved using it to pick up my friends and drive them around. Then it wasn't until I was 16 that I was able to get a driver's license. And then was able to drive outside of town then. But that was a long ways off when we first started driving. Then there was the matter of learning to use a gun. That was another thing that my father thought I needed to learn, and the fathers of my closest friends felt the same way, because they were getting the same kind of instructions as I was. And those fathers felt like my father, that it was better for us to learn to use a gun safely while we were still young. That would be much better than waiting until we were older. Just like they felt with driving the car, that it was much better and much safer for us to learn to drive the car when we were still young. And not many people were driving. So, my daddy would take me down to our pasture with his .22 rifle, and he bought a new .22 for me. Oh, I was so proud of that gun. That was one of my prized possessions. And we would go down in the pasture, and my daddy would show me how to be safe with the gun. All of the safe things to do. And then he would show me how to aim the gun at a target. We would set up targets from old tin cans and things like that. And he would show me to aim at a target and to pull the trigger. And oh, I thought that was fascinating. I was so proud. I was a little bit afraid, but also so proud when I learned to use that gun and was able to shoot it myself, and then to know how to handle it safely. And after my daddy was satisfied that I knew how to handle it safely, and he had seen me shooting many times and saw how well I handled the gun, I was allowed to go down to our pasture to practice shooting by myself. And I would go down there and set up a target. I would put together cans and things like that, whatever I could find around, and make a target. And then I would get over as far away as I felt I could manage, and I would shoot and try to hit that target. And I was shot till I was getting pretty good. And I was hitting the target most of the time. And I was getting so proud of myself and having such a good time. And then something happened. I got it ready to shoot at the target. I set the gun in place, and I pulled the trigger. And between the time that I pulled the trigger and the bullet went off, a jackrabbit jumped in front of the target, and I hit the jackrabbit and killed it. no intention of killing that rabbit. I didn't want to kill that rabbit. I didn't want to kill anything. I was just shooting targets for fun. And when I saw that dead rabbit lying there that I had killed with my gun, I could hardly bear it. And I just started crying. And I cried and cried. Sat there with that gun on my lap crying. And my mother said, when she came down to pick me up, I was sitting on the fence crying. I was brokenhearted because I had killed something. And I knew then I could never go hunting. I could never kill another thing. And I was brokenhearted that I had killed that jackrabbit. Now, after that, I had fun with my friend Jean, and sometimes my friend Ruth, and then even later with Ernie when he was visiting. I had fun shooting at the deer target of Jean's father. That was a lot of fun. But I knew I could never shoot at a real deer. There's no way I could do that. I couldn't kill a deer. And I could not even aim at another live being again in my life. That was the way I felt. I was thankful that I knew how to shoot, and I enjoyed shooting at targets, but there's no way I could shoot at any live animals again. So that's the story of my hunting experience. With my one trophy, a jackrabbit, and my broken-hearted killing him. So that was my experience hunting. I was very thankful that my father had taught me to use a gun, and he used it safely. But it would only be for target shooting. That's all I would ever want it for. And that's the story of my experience hunting.